Five, four, three, two, one. We are live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Almassian. Today, I'm very happy to be joined by Alex Craner. He is a political analyst and author of The Grand Deception, the Browder Hoax. Link of his Twitter and the book, if you want to purchase it, in the description below, and we will speak a little bit about his book at the end of this discussion. To know more about his book, and if you're interested, you can also purchase his book. Alex, thank you very much for joining me on Syriana Analysis. It's a pleasure to have you. And as Vanessa Billy said, you are his favorite analyst. So I would be honored today to have you on my channel.
It's my honor, Kevork. Thank you for having me.
It's a great pleasure. So today we're going to discuss the aftermath of the alleged coup in Russia, right? And the rise and fall of Putin's cook, Prigozhin. I hope I'm not butchering his name. I've been trying to pronounce his name for 3-4 days now, and every time I butcher, still butchering his name. But I will continue calling him Prigozhin, and still, like everybody heard about the dramatic event in Russia with the head of the Wagner Group rebelling against the Russian armed forces. I think the starting question would be: do you believe this was a psyop, a counterintelligence operation by the Russian Federation? Because some people still insist on social media platforms that it was, and this has played in favor of Putin. And will Prigozhin and his mercenary group play any role in the Ukrainian conflict in the future, since they now moved allegedly to Belarus, which is less than 200 kilometers away from Kiev, right?
Well, it's an excellent question, Kevork, and I think that uh, you can also put allegedly next to everything I'm going to say about this, because as many analysts as I've listened to on this subject, and I've listened to both sides, like I listened to the Times Radio and um, General Philip Breedlove and Ben Hodges and all these Western analysts, and also uh, let's say the not pro Western analysts like Ray
Mm-hmm.
um, uh, Colin, well,
McGregor?
yeah, McGregor, forgive me.
Yeah, yeah.
Obviously, a lot of information we think we understand about this is could be correct or could be wrong. Um, I am inclined to believe that this was a psyop, and there's a number of reasons why I believe that. Well, let's start with the fact that there are, I believe, some 8 million Ukrainians in Russia who
Yes.
have migrated there, and we should assume that some of them are potentially or in reality Western sleeper agents
Yeah.
who are there and who could, you know, come in useful to play acts of sabotage or terrorism or whatever. So, uh, being practically indistinguishable from other Russians, maybe it would be easier to spot an American or a Brit, but Ukrainian extremely difficult. So, let's say that this is a security concern for the Russian Federation, and also, being an autocratic regime, uh, it really is vulnerable to political beheading. So if let's say the West managed somehow to stage a successful coup against Vladimir Putin, I think that that would be the greatest risk that Russia faces today, and it could potentially undo everything. And we've seen for millennia now this that this conflict um, between state sovereigns
Yeah.
and the oligarchy within has very often resulted in the oligarchy assassinating the sovereign, from the times of the Gracchi brothers and Julius Caesar onwards, and even before that. And then, like, once the sovereign is eliminated, then this opens the space for political infighting, where you don't know anymore how the things are going, but it opens the space wide to the infiltration of Western foreign agents, and maybe return of the NGOs and all of these risks. So I believe that i- it's a possibility that Prigozhin was used to, let's say, be the magnet for these elements.
Hmm.
Why? Because he used to serve Vladimir Putin's food in the Kremlin.
Yeah.
He had the nickname Putin's chef.
Yes.
That's how close he was, and that's how well trusted he was. So obviously, he's a man who can get very close, who probably has a direct line to Vladimir Putin, and he's been left to bark loudly at the Russian military general staff for weeks now,
Hmm.
which to me is simply unimaginable. I used to be a soldier. I served in Croatian army during the war in the 1990s. Uh, soldiers always have a mind of their own. They don't always agree with the orders and the strategy of their superiors. But one thing that is absolutely imperative in the military is that when your superior gives you an order, you execute it. If you
Yes.
have a problem with it, then you deal with it quietly with that superior directly. You don't go on YouTube and uh, air publicly these extraordinary stunts. Well, not only did he do this, he also remained in his position. And my understanding of this, I just heard from an interview with Ray McGovern on with Judge Andrew Napolitano. Apparently, there was a meeting between Vladimir Putin, Shoigu, and Prigozhin after his first outburst. And so, what did they discuss? We don't know.
Hmm.
But if it was a psyop, for sure, it would have had to be of necessity a secret psyop, meaning they wouldn't, publish a policy paper. Here's what we're going to do. They would just do it quietly. And so perhaps, this whole projection about how uh, Yevgeny Prigozhin had political ambitions, and he had a massive problem with the top military brass in Moscow, uh, maybe was staged to attract to him the fifth columns
Hmm.
and potential saboteurs and terrorists and assassins within Russia, and to expose this network. Will we know? I think maybe at some point in the relatively distant future we might learn these things. But in the meantime, I see that everybody on all sides is guessing. And on the pro-Western side, U.S., UK, and NATO, I see that the guessing is suffused with wishful thinking and very very hopeful interpretations that this is the beginning of the end of the Vladimir Putin regime, that he is about to suffer Nikolai Ceausescu's fate and so forth, which I think is very, very far from truth, very, very far from reality. I think that the effect of this has only consolidated the Russian people and political establishment behind Vladimir Putin's leadership even more.
I just want to ask you here a follow-up question on you mentioned the wishful thinking, right? In the Western media reporting, activists on social media platforms. We've seen this so many times in the past. We've seen it in Syria, we've seen it with China, we've seen it in Venezuela, Cuba, and now with Russia. And it makes me wonder because this this media strategy is counterproductive for them because they raise the hopes, the bar of the hopes, and then they get disappointed. So this is something that is negatively affecting the morale of their own people, their popular base, right? So
Yes.
I always wonder, why do they repeat this same thing? Because when the everything was happening, the drama in Russia, and I was following Twitter Spaces. I was following some of the mainstream coverage on Twitter if it's posted there, because I don't open my TV to watch news outlets at all.
I
Like
don't
it's
either.
yeah, it's like my TV is like, if I want to watch some YouTube podcast, that's it. Other than that, I don't watch news. But there was this mix, like they're mixing lots of wishful hopes in their reporting, and it backfires on them. So is this something that they are unaware of after so many experiences, that they are shooting themselves in the leg?
Uh, okay, work. Again, an excellent question, and I think that to answer it, I think that we should not underestimate the tendency and capacity to just go off the rails and be stupid on the part of the Western establishment. And I think, like we've seen this throughout history. Already in World War II, when most militaries had machine guns, but they still, the generals still pushed their troops in this frontal assault where they would just be mowed down. And rather than saying, oh, this doesn't work, they would just send more and more and more waves of soldiers, even though all they did is get them killed in very large numbers. And so it wasn't that, the generals were not, the generals were simply stupid. And then we saw a little bit how this works in the run up to war in Ukraine. In January last year, before the hostilities even started, when the German admiral of the navy, I think Kai Akim Schonberg, I may be butchering his name now, but he was in India on some military exercise business, and in a press event, he said, "Well, the easiest and least destructive way to diffuse this crisis would be to acknowledge Russia's security concerns and to give Vladimir Putin and Russian leadership the how do you call it, the respect that they demand and probably deserve." That's pretty much the gist of his words then. And that very day, his military career ended. He was the vice admiral of German Navy,
Yes.
and that was it. It it seems that the system simply doesn't want to hear anything but what it wants to believe. And anybody who tries to talk different sense to them, to say, this is not working, we have to rethink this, they simply eliminate them. And so what you get is this blind zealotry, which continues to push harder and harder with solutions that don't work, and
Hmm.
don't allow rethinking. They don't allow going back to the drawing boards. They don't allow retracting some of their uh, strategies. And so I think that the result ultimately is that the whole juggernaut acts as a madman, like a by lunatics.
Hmm. Putin actually, after the second day of the alleged coup, he met with his security officials, the defense minister, and the security and military personnel. Let's say the senior ones. He gave a speech, and today he also gave a speech. There is this argument now, of course, by the mainstream media, and I'm not saying that they're always wrong, but this is what they report, that is trying to prove himself now that he's the strong man of Russia, and they're arguing that Russia, as we know it, is Putin's Russia as we know it is over, and now Russia will have to be like trying to deal with its internal issues with the different circles of power inside of Russia. So Putin, the pressure on Putin by the Wagner, the head of the Wagner Group, was actually productive, and that's why the West has to increase the pressure on Putin, because he will backtrack now. He will try to negotiate with the West.
Yes, I think that's just another example of their wishful thinking. They apparently have prepared for this. Another thing that Ray McGovern says, that in spite of the fact that this whole boondoggle with Wagner started on Friday last week, he said that the Gang of Eight, the Congress within the Congress in the United States, was briefed on this
Hmm.
on Wednesday, 2 days
Yes.
before. So what does that tell you? That means that they were obviously informed. They probably encouraged and participated in this. Prigozhin was known with Western intelligence services and with the mm, Ukrainian leadership, or some of it at least. And so they talked between themselves that they knew that this was coming. Now again, I go back to my guess that I believe that Prigozhin led them on into this, but like this kind of drew them into believing that maybe they get to prevail, that maybe they get their regime change in Russia. And then like they had all these contingency plans about how they were going to go in and how they're going to, they want to partition Russia, and that probably they cannot do from one day to the next. But if they can eliminate Putin, they can immediately try to find their own people whose loyalty maybe they can command, and get Alexei Navalny out of prison and give him power. And who knows what they planned. And maybe this lure from Prigozhin got them all really, really excited that now they get to implement all these wonderful plans that they had. Except I don't think that that's going to happen, any of this. I think that Vladimir Putin is actually in a stronger position today than he was before Prigozhin's stunt.
So you agree with me on the assessment that the United States strategy in Europe with, let's say, with Russia is that the European continent, they see it that has the European continent has four bridges, which is France, Germany, Poland, and Ukraine, and they need this continuity of NATO countries that can that the United States can project its power into Russia. So. Ukraine's candidacy to NATO, if Ukraine joins NATO, that means NATO and the United States can project their power inside of the Russian Federation with the hope of disintegrating the Russian Federation, dividing it on different lines, and basically the demise of the Russian Federation. This is the end goal of NATO. And that is why the Russian side had to do this over like the reaction in Ukraine, and they launched an offensive in Ukraine in order to create a buffer zone between NATO and the Russian Federation.
Oh yeah, there's no question about that. I think that's absolutely correct. And I think that, okay, so uh, why is this all being done? Why is it so important for NATO to try to regime change and destabilize and partition Russia? Because NATO is the latest military muscle organization of the empire, and the empire is simply a reincarnation of the British Empire, which is still undead. Even though the American side is economically and diplomatically and militarily the dominant component of all this, the strategy and the philosophy and the ideology still originates from the City of London.
Hmm.
And the City of London, their imperial strategy always has been to protect and maintain hegemony over the Eurasian landmass. And the first time this was explicitly formulated, as far as we know, is in 1904 by Halford Mackinder,
Yes.
and subsequently he also formulated this theory of the Heartland theory.
Yes.
And the Heartland theory basically amounts to the dictum: who rules Eastern Europe rules the Heartland. Who rules the Heartland rules the world island, and whoever rules the world island rules the world.
Hmm.
So Eastern Europe, we know what that is. That's particularly
Yes.
Western Russia and Ukraine. The Heartland is the whole zone between, Germany and the Caucasus and the eastern western Russia and Siberia. And then the world island is Eurasian landmass. And so
Yes.
basically this strategy has been, as the empire transferred its seat. Yeah, there you go.
Hmm.
Perfect. As the empire transferred its seat of power to the United States, this strategy followed, and it was reformulated again by Zbigniew Brzezinski in his 1997 book, The Grand Chessboard.
Yes.
Almost exactly what Halford Mackinder wrote at the beginning of the century. Zbigniew Brzezinski regurgitated, and even under the Donald Trump's administration in 2018, it was again restated in a foreign service into a Senate Foreign Relations Committee by Undersecretary of State for Eurasian and European Affairs Wes Mitchell, who
Hmm.
basically said that the top priority of the administration's foreign policy was to defend uh, the U.S. Dominance over the Eurasian continent. Okay, well, how do you defend your dominance over the Eurasian continent? You have to make sure that a rival doesn't emerge, because militarily you cannot police this. This is a huge area of the world. So what you do is you divide it into small political entities that are weak, that are dependent on you, and that are constantly opposed to one another, and that you can easily trigger into a war. And then you provide them the weaponry, you provide them the loans, but your banks and your corporations always finance the development, the extraction of resources, the the employment of the labor power, and so forth. And so all this works wonderfully and has worked wonderfully for 200 years. The problem is that they didn't see the emergence of Russia and China as new hegemons on the continent. And particularly, one thing that Zbigniew Brzezinski was warning against is that the United States had to prevent not only emergence of a credible uh, power, but a collusion of two or more powers that together could kick the empire of the continent. And this
But
has
don't you
actually
think?
happened. So
But don't
this
you
is
think
this
it
is
has backfired?
oh yeah, it has backfired. But like now they are trying to uh, use Ukraine to regime change Russia, to destabilize the political system, and again to try to manage to partition Russia into five or more smaller, weaker entities. And so this is for the empire absolutely existential matter. The empire completely falls if they don't destroy Russia. And so obviously, any glimmer of hope that they might actually be able to succeed, i.e., the recent quote unquote coup attempt by Prigozhin, um, immediately got them very, very excited with hope. With hope that after all they might be able to achieve their goals and to wrest back their dominant role in on over the Eurasian landmass.
Yeah, and actually, I just wanted to show this map, which shows Russia, Iran, and China. And in my understanding, they represent the pillars for the Eurasian region. And the strategy was always to keep the Russians and the Chinese away from each other, and also these three countries not to come together. And now, I would say, thanks to the Western or American policy against Russia, China and Russia are becoming closer, and Iran and China and Russia, three of them are coming very much closer. And I don't think there was a time in the past 100 years where we have seen that these three countries are aligning their interests too close to each other as it is the case now. And this represents a major challenge to the US hegemony over the world. And to be honest with you, I am concerned because as much as these countries come closer together, we will see the American allies are becoming also more aligned together, pushed by the United States, for example, in Far East Asia, in Europe. The Middle East refused it. The all the time there was this talk that those Arabs are backward, blah blah blah. You know how they portray their Arabs, and to be honest, the Arabs turned out to be much more clever in this situation, and they diversified their relationship between the East and West. And I'm specifically now referring to Saudi Arabia and the UAE as the strong powers in the region, who refused to become to put all their eggs in one basket. And now Saudi Arabia is telling the Americans, our country comes first. The UAE is telling the United States, our country comes first. And they are striking deals in the Middle East to de escalate the situation there, because in the past decades, the US divide and conquer strategy that you already mentioned, which was the case also in Eurasia, was a similar strategy in the Middle East. And now we see Iran and Saudi Arabia are getting along, and the Yemeni war has been put on the shelf, and they're trying to solve the Syrian crisis. So this is good news for the Middle East, unlike for Europe, because European continent, and I specifically mean Western Europe, they have put all their eggs in the basket of the United States, and this is very risky. Very risky. If the United States doesn't emerge victorious from the Ukraine war, what's going to happen to Western Europe?
I think it's going to be extremely interesting. You know, we see that in Germany, the alternative for Germany, the new, the you know, the quote unquote extreme right party is
Yeah.
gaining more and more power as you know people support it. I believe that a lot of political capital in Western Europe is under the surface. You know, it's not visible yet, but of necessity it is there. And on the example of Germany, you know, Germany is being deindustrialized. It's been pushed into a recession, and their industries are being you know, encouraged to move back to to move to the United States or China. So German industrialists obviously cannot be happy with what's going on, and for once they are on the very they are on the same side of the political spectrum with labor, because people are also losing job, and ordinary people are looking forward to winters of no heating. And so everybody is getting a very raw deal by following the American dictate, and everybody understands that it was the Americans who destroyed Germany's Nord Stream 2 pipelines.
Yeah, and
Nord
then
Stream,
blamed on
both sides.
Ukraine.
Yes, well, you know, I but you know, like, it actually, it's laughable, but in a way it's serious, you know,
Yeah.
because it's the it's the winners who write history. And honestly, if the Western alliance prevailed in this war, then they would you know, cite New York Times, Washington Post, no, what was it, Wall Street Journal article about this ridiculous ploy. But you know, you have a respectable citation, and you write that it was destroyed by some rogue element of the Ukrainian nationalists. And you know, that's how history gets written. And I mean, to me, it's dizzying to think how much of the history we think we know today was written in exactly that way.
Yeah.
But I think we have no choice, but we have to push back against that. And I think going back to the situation in Europe, so we have this, I believe, very strong, very powerful political capital that is now kind of under the surface, not so visible apart from the rise of the AFD party, which is an informal alliance between labor and industrialists, and also to an extent ordinary people. And then I think another bridge that you mentioned is you have
Yes.
very strong social uprisings going on. You have President Macron asking to be included in the next summit of the BRICS countries in Johannesburg, in Pretoria next month. And the way the Anglo-American establishment, or as they like to call themselves, the transatlantic community, have been treating France for the last 100 years, but especially the last 20 years or so, it has been very callous. It has been very uh, humiliating. That's a that's a long story, and now we're seeing again this political capital that's pulling in the direction of Eurasian integrations, in the direction of Russia and China, that is starting to emerge. The front. You have more and more of these media personalities and public leaders speaking out the Anglo-American establishment that they treat France. You have President of France asking to join the BRICS meeting. So I think that we will see more and more of these cracks in the alliance, in the North Atlantic alliance, led by France, Germany, and also obviously Hungary and Bulgaria and Slovakia. And I think that we'll probably see over the next few years a fairly radical transformation in the European political landscape, as well as the continent's security architecture. And the three nations you mentioned in Eurasia, China, Russia, and Iran, are now actively working on that new security architecture, and Iran is becoming the pivot of West Asian security architecture. And at this point, there's very little that either the Americans or the NATO can actually do about it. They are slowly and irreversibly being squeezed out.
Actually, I just want to mention that the alternative for Germany, the last poll that I saw yesterday, they scored 20.5% of the votes in Germany, which is 1% more than the ruling party, SPD, the Social Democrats. The
Us,
Greens lost a
yeah.
lot. The Free Democrats, they lost like 10 points already. And they just won their first federal elections in Thuringia, and they will rule this federal state.
Yes, yes, I saw that.
And
Yes,
yeah, and uh,
that's
and their
amazing. That I
their
think I
policy
think
toward
just the
Russia
two.
and Syria is good, in my opinion.
Oh
They have been
yes,
calling
yes, I believe
for.
so. I believe so, and I think that these, like these things, 2 years ago were practically unthinkable. It was very difficult to imagine things like that be real today. But that makes me think that maybe things that might appear unthinkable today might become reality in a year or two from now. So
Hmm.
I think that we're in for very, very interesting developments, and I think that there's a good chance that they will be very good developments, uh, also for Europe, but for humanity in general, because we are now diverging from a model of governance in society that has been pretty much oppressing the humanity for centuries now, perhaps 2000 years. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
there's a certain continuity that goes back to the classical Greeks and the Roman Empire, which now I think is beginning to lose its grip. And like the little man behind the curtain is becoming exposed to more and more people.
Hmm.
I understand now.
I will screen an article published by Alexander Dugin yesterday. He says, "No more threats, time to respond." He says the West interprets any self restraint on Moscow's part in the war as weakness. If the rules only exist for one side and simply do not exist for the West, let alone for the Kiev obsessives, then it is no longer about rules. A language that only one participant in the dialogue understands serves no purpose. After all, no one inside the country needs or understands these rules. Simply threatening that we will respond if necessary and that we have what we need is clearly not enough. We have to respond. If we have what we need, now is the time. But if we have nothing, we can do it. Do it or find something. Preferably difficult, targeted, and very frightening. There is no cure for anger. We must proceed from this. Crimea will be attacked, and so will our old territories. They are already attacking. We will not reach the West yet. Still, the question of the tactical nuclear weapons. This is the last topic, not the penultimate, but there is something we can do against the madman. I think this is a case where if we can do it, we will do it. Otherwise, our threats are becoming too light. We are holding the front, and thanks to the heroic efforts of our men, it is difficult, but we are holding, and the enemy's losses are huge. But something else is needed here. It would be better if we were sharp, unexpected, hard, and fatal for the enemy. Victory is above any rule, which is our situation makes no sense, and nothing less than victory will satisfy us. After this, whatever we want to call it, an attempted coup or a psyop or whatever, do you see that there are some voices in Russia are now pushing Putin into more hardline approach towards the West, like such as Alexander Dugin and other theorists, scholars, intellectuals in the Russian Federation, and even security probably personnel who were saying that Putin is too soft with the West or too diplomatic with the West. Do you also share my concern that Putin may become a more hardliner with the West in the coming weeks?
I do not actually. I believe that Vladimir Putin and the people he has around him have a strategy which is, I think, orders of magnitude more um, sophisticated than most people give it credit. Of course, Russia has the military might to defeat not only Ukraine, but also the whole rest of NATO combined. That is a possibility. But what does that achieve? It would divide the world into two blocks, uh, and the hostilities would remain. And wreaking large-scale destruction would probably uh, guarantee that the conflict would reemerge at some point in the future. Because the world divided in two block would allow the other block, the defeated West, to regroup, rearm, and try to regain their primacy at some future time. I think that Vladimir Putin is very cognizant of the the relationships with not only other nations of the world but also the peoples of the world. I think that in addition to directing a military campaign, he has to be careful about how Russia's conduct of the war affects their relationship with with Turkey, with China, with Iran, with South Africa, with other BRICS nations, how it affects his adversaries in Europe. You know, if we perceive Russia as a really truly dangerous threat, and then we, back up behind our bloc and we close ranks behind our leadership, even if we hate them, then he didn't. He won the big battle, but maybe there's going to be another war in the future, because keep in mind, Russia has been attacked from the West repeatedly for the last 300 years. From the Swedish invasion, and the first Crimea, then Napoleon's invasion, then first Crimea War, and Operation Barbarossa in 1941, which wasn't just Germany invading. That was a very large coalition of European powers that joined Germany. We sanitized this history, but Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Hungary, Spain, mm, Italy, Bulgaria, Hungary, many nations came together to put together this 4 million strong invasion force. It wasn't just the Germans. So, do you want to just win this war quickly and then divide the world into these two blocks, and maybe then again, 20, 30, 50 years from now, have to go through another cycle of wars? Because I think that at this point, Russian leadership can potentially root out and completely disenfranchise the occult oligarchies that are ruling the West today, and that have ruled the West for the past several centuries. And I think that this is the real potential, and I believe that uh, Vladimir Putin does not intend to squander this opportunity just out of haste, or to pander to more aggressive elements in his political environment.
Mhm. I will share a tweet that you recently posted on Twitter, and you quoted the video from Kim.com's page, and it's a song that the Russians are singing. You say the blossom of a healthy society, healthy, patriotic, attractive-looking, smartly dressed, no bodily desecration with cheap, random scribbled tattoos, no pink hairs. Quite a contrast of what we got used to in the West. I will just play this song for the audience so that they know what are you talking about. What do you mean by a healthy society, and the parallels and the comparisons that you made with the Western societies? Do you see that it's a more unhealthy societies here in probably in Western Europe?
Oh yeah, for sure. I've been observing this for many years. So I'm from Croatia. I live in Monaco. I've lived a good chunk of my life in the United States, and I've observed that over the last, let's call it 3 decades, the people in the West are looking less and less healthy. There's a lot more obesity and chronic disease. You can see that in people when like when you go to supermarkets, when you go to places like, I don't know, like Disneyland, in the United States. You see that like the average person just doesn't look quite right, and we see a lot of that, and we see more and more people. I think it's some kind of a act of self rejection. They like, I'm not talking about the tattoos that are like expensive, nice ones that people put some thought into it and then they put it on and whatever. But
Hmm.
there's a lot of these random scribble tattoos that people have, like on their face and on their bodies, everything. It looks like they, just scribble stuff on with a pen, except it's permanent. And so when I saw that video that you just saw, it actually struck me. Because I thought, like, look at these young people. They're all looking healthy. None of them have any tattoos on them. None of them have face piercings. None of them have, like pink hair and stuff. They look happy, healthy, mm, attractive looking, healthy looking. And by now it's quite a contrast to what I've actually become used to seeing around me in the West. And I think that that's a reflection of a healthy society, whereas the West is now, without a doubt, a decaying society. And I think we need to turn this ship around, or otherwise, like, where is it
Actu-
going?
Actually, this lifestyle that we have seen, for example, now in this video, the dresses and men and women, right? Like you have two genders in these
Yes.
videos. It is considered the far right talking points here in Berlin, where I live, and I'm apparently a far right person according to this narrative, and.
Oh, divorce. We're all far right, but I tell you, I'd rather be far right than far wrong.
Yeah, yeah. That's so good. Really. You nailed it. Actually, I sometimes I feel like I'm an alien and I've seen so
Yeah.
many different types of people, and to be honest with you, everyone is free to do whatever they want. I just want them not to come after the small children and try to program them in the schools, in the kindergartens. I have relatives here in Germany, and they have children, and in the kindergarten, they're already being programmed by the blue hair and pink hair teachers, telling them that they shouldn't eat meat and they have to go vegan, and teaching them. They're 3, 4, 5 years old. They're teaching them the rainbow flags and the meaning of the all the sexualities that they believe in. They are gonna. They already opened a kindergarten for gay and lesbian kids and trans kids. This they're like 3, 4, 5 years old. I don't
Yeah.
understand.
So
Like
that's
you, like anyone. I'm very honest with this. If you're over 18 years old and you want to change your sex or gender and do any sort of surgery, you want to cut your head or you want to cut any part of your body, it's yours, right? But just don't come and force your opinion on others. And I don't like this tactic that they use, that if you don't accept this lifestyle, then you're a bad person. No, I'm not a bad person. I just have some boundaries and I want to preserve my family roots. I want to preserve some family values. I want to raise kids. I want to have family. So if you chose a different type of lifestyle, do it. Like I really don't mind, but don't come and tell me that I'm a bad person because I'm not accepting your worldview. Right? This is just my problem with them, and apparently this is a far right talking point. Alex, if I want to end up this conversation, the Grand Deception, the broader hoax. First of all, if you can just in 2 minutes tell the audience what is it about and where they can purchase your book.
yes, thank you. So I wrote this book in 2017, and it was it started off as a book about William Browder, who was a hedge fund manager who ran the largest foreign-owned hedge fund in Russia during the 1990s, when Russia was transitioning from communism to capitalism under Boris Yeltsin.
Hmm.
And well, he made a lot of money there, and uh, he was the thing that impressed me when I met him is he was the very first person that I met who ever had anything positive to say about Vladimir Putin. So this is why I kind of began to pay attention. But Bill Browder became one of the most prolific lobbyists against Russia and Vladimir Putin, and he has managed to lobby through the U.S. Congress in 2012 the so-called Magnitsky Act.
Hmm.
So the Magnitsky Act is a legislation supposedly in support of human rights, but it's actually an abomination in the legal Western legal standards. And the whole story was a hoax. And I kind of knew about this because having met him, I learned certain aspects about his story in Russia. And when I read his book, I realized it was a hoax. But that book, that bestseller titled "The Red Notice," is exactly covers the narrative he used to push Magnitsky Act through U.S. Congress. The significance of this act is that it's deemed to be the first salvo in the new Cold War between West and Russia. And then he continued to push this Magnitsky legislation in all Western jurisdictions, in Europe, in Canada, in Australia, and New Zealand, and so forth. And my worry about this is that it became obvious that he wasn't just one man, that there was a very powerful network of vested interest that was backing him. And I realized that if they carry on pushing what they're pushing, that they are going to lead us into World War III against Russia. And so I thought somebody needs to unmask these people. And then I thought, well, maybe I know more about this than the average person. So I thought, may as well be me. So that's why I wrote this book. And it consists of 6 chapters, of which only 2 deal with Bill Browder, really.
Mhm.
Because as I started researching into all this, the rabbit hole became enormous. And so the 4 chapters of the book are more about the historical context to the relationship between Russia and the West, which actually stretches back at least 2 centuries.
Amazing. Guys, the link of the book is in the description below, and also the link of his Twitter account in the description below. You can either purchase it via a website, or probably you can follow him and also ask him personally on Twitter where to purchase the book. I just want to make a final comment, because I was reading the comments now, and a friend, Rudiger Price, says nothing wrong with plant-based diet, Kevork. Funny you criticize the obese, ugly Westerners and then you criticize the vegans. I'm not criticizing the vegans. I'm criticizing them forcing their lifestyle or food choices on the kids when they are 3 years old, and you tell them it's wrong to eat meat, and to sensationalize or play on the emotions of the kids can also get programmed. You can become a vegan, you can become
Um,
a vegetarian, you want to eat I'm not promoting for burgers. I don't eat burgers. I eat very healthy. I eat steaks, I eat fish, I eat vegan food, I eat every sort of things that fits my body, but I'm against forcing kids by manipulating them into a certain type of diet. That's just my comment on
Also,
this.
if I may add, I don't think you criticized ugly, obese Westerners, and neither did I. But there's a so I think that the way formulated this comment is not correct. I think that you can't get around the fact that in the Western world now we have 30 or 40% obesity rates, and it's not to say that there's anything wrong with obese people as individuals, but obviously something is wrong, because we shouldn't be 4 out of 10 obese. Something went
Yeah.
wrong, and we should address this rather than pretending that the problem is not there.
Exactly. We're on the same page of this. Alex Grainer, thank you very much for your time, first of all.
Thank you
I'm
for
very
having me, Kevork.
happy.
It was a great pleasure.
Amazing. It was really amazing conversation with you. I'm very happy and pleased. And I was reading the comments now. The followers were very pleased with your insight as well. Guys, if you like this video, please follow Alex on Twitter and share this video with your friends. I will also upload this video later on a higher quality version on Twitter. So stay tuned for that. And if you want to support my independent work, just like what I do from my home, you can become a patron. Link in the description below. And see you next time.